the Keynesian argument, the alternative is, no, that doesn't work, it's not harmonious. What we need to do is to get the government to intervene, which sounds good, but we're intervening with the government in order to either boost wages or cut the taxes of capitalists or boost spending in order to make capitalism work better. And that's their solution. The Marxist view is capitalism won't work better whether it's the harmonious view of the financial pages or the Keynesian view, because it's got contradictions that cannot be resolved under capitalism. That's what makes Marxist theory of economics revolutionary, and it suggests that you have to replace capitalism rather than make it work.
Het is zondag 14 oktober en dit is Links Hobby's podcast van Authentiek Links. Vandaag hebben we weer een interview vanuit de Communist University van afgelopen augustus. Het interview met marxistisch econoom Michael Roberts is een uitbreiding op het gastcollege dat hij hield over de relevantie van Marx's economische theorieën vandaag de dag. Dit gastcollege is opgenomen en gepubliceerd door de CPGB en je kunt deze vinden op onze website linkshobbies.nl of in de beschrijving van deze podcast. Hij is zeker het bekijken waard als je meer wilt weten over een marxistische analyse over de kapitalistische economie. De blog van Michael kun je vinden op thenextrecession.wordpress.com en hij heeft ook 2 boeken uitgebracht die je overal kunt krijgen, getiteld The Long Depression, Marxism and the Global Crisis of Capitalism en Marx 200, a review of Marx's economics 200 years after his birth. Zie voor links in de beschrijving bij deze podcast. Wat hem apart zet als marxistische econoom ten opzichte van andere marxisten, is dat hij stevig inzet op de visie dat de grondoorzaak van elke kapitalistische crisis de wet is van de tendens van de vallende winstvoet van het kapitalisme. So, Michael, you've been talking here on the Communist University on the 3 laws of Marxists, of economic laws. But first, what can you tell me about yourself, maybe? You've been a Marxist economist for the last few decades. So, who are you?
Well, my name's Michael Roberts. I've been a Marxist economist for many decades, because I'm quite old. I've now hit 70, so I'm an old man, so your listeners will have to bear with the old man if he starts going off in a weird direction. I've worked most of that time as a professional economist in the City of London and the various financial banks and so on, so I've been in the bowels of finance capital, where decisions are made about how to invest all the money that they've stolen from us, and making decisions about whether the dollar should go up or the dollar will go down, that sort of thing, to make a living. But at the same time, I've been engaged in trying to understand what's really going on in the world economy from a Marxist point of view, looking at the nature of capitalism, how it's developed, its distortions and its derangements in the direction of inequality, of causing crises, of now destroying the planet through climate change and other environmental disasters. So you could say that I've been a schizophrenic. Marx has a theory of value which has dual value. It's on one side things that people need, he calls use value, and the things that people have that capitalists sell on the market, commodities, exchange value. So value, or the price of something, of a commodity, according to Marx, is a dual value. It's both use and exchange value. My life is a dual. It's between working for capitalism and thinking of ways to defeat it.
All right, and you've been talking here on the Communist University. It was basically an excerpt from Capital Volume 1, if I may summarize it myself like that. So you've been talking about the 3 main economic motion laws of Marxism. What are those 3 laws?
Well, your listeners may not know, but this year was the 200th anniversary of Marx's birth. He was born in May 1818, and when he was in his 30s, he wrote the Communist Manifesto, but most importantly, his economic theories had developed between the period of 1850 up to 1867, when he wrote and published Volume 1 of Capital. Listeners may know that There were other publications of those volumes, 2 and 3, and some people say 4, not by him because he died before they were published, but all these writings and notes, voluminous, incomprehensibly difficult to read handwriting, was converted into various publications of those volumes. But out of all that work, I think we can distill Marx's economic ideas, or other ideas, political ideas, his economic ideas down to 3 laws. One is the law of value, namely that things that people sell on the market, commodities that we buy and use, the value of those commodities depend primarily on how much exertion of labour time has gone into it, how much human labour has been put into that to produce it, not any other reason like demand or scarcity or whatever. It's really the more labour time is put into something, the more value it's going to have. The second law says that capitalists are continue competing with each other to drive up profitability. They want to do that by using more technology, because then they can keep down the cost of labour. Increasing the cost of technology use of technology will increase the productivity of labour, and that will boost the amount of production they can get for lower cost. But in so doing, they cause a problem, which is the third law, is that they find in driving to get more productivity, get prices down, they're actually squeezing their profits themselves, and there is a tendency for profitability to fall over a period of time, and this causes recurrent and regular crises under capitalism. So Marx's theory is, when we look at the terrible crisis we had in slumping 10 years ago in the Great Recession, and previous ones, the Great Depression of the 1930s and so on, these major slumps are caused by capitalism's contradictions between its inability to sustain growth and investment in jobs for us all and decent incomes because profitability is under threat. There's a conflict all the time in capitalism between trying to get profit rather than meeting the needs of people. And that basic conflict is the essence of those 3 laws.
Well, that is a nice summary of your talk here at Communist University, and I would recommend to all the listeners at home to have a watch at the video which is recorded here. But the third law especially is very contentious among Marxists. Why is that?
Well, there are different views about what causes crises in the world. What do we mean by crises? I mean the big slumps in production and investment, when people lose their jobs, when companies go to the wall, when employment is and incomes fall, which we saw in the Great Recession, as it's called, in 2008. Now, lots of different explanations for this. The mainstream explanation, or the one you would read in the papers, is it was either a chance in a billion, or it was reckless banks out of control, not able to operate in the interests of the population and being too greedy, or it was, another one is that there was suddenly a collapse in confidence in the economy. Confidence is over that sort of like a fairy dust, an angel which exists. Confidence suddenly collapsed. Everybody's confident, and then they weren't confident, and then we had a slump. Those are the mainstream sort of explanations. But more radical alternative explanations, Marxist ones, fall into 3 camps. One is to say that there's a tendency for a lack of demand. If workers' wages are held down, they can't buy all the goods they produce, so there's underconsumption there. Less consumption than is being produced. So capitalism is continually overproducing and causing a slump. Another one is capitalism is anarchic. It's all over the place. Some capitalists are producing without just for profit. They're not thinking about what people need. It's not planned properly, so everything gets into disproportion and then it collapses. And the one which I think is more accurate, and I thought this was Marx's view, is that it's not, those 2 things are there, but they're a result of the process of a struggle for profit against the need to raise productivity. As I said before, there's a tendency to, the aim is to raise productivity so we can get costs down and make more profit. They do that by employing more machinery, factories, technology, as opposed to labour. But because labour is the only form of value, there's a tendency for profits to fall relative to the cost. So there's a relative fall in the rate of profit over time, even though productivity is going up. And that creates the conditions in certain times when the massive profit falls, everything falls, and then you get crises on a regular basis. So there are different theories of what causes a crisis, and this is a debate. Most Marxist economists, your listeners may not know, would not agree with me. They think it's either a combination of all three, or it's one of the others, and that the rate of profit argument, which is in Marx's Capital, so they ought to know it, is something that's not particularly relevant to crises. I don't agree with that position, but it continues to be a debate. But it's worth listeners perhaps listening to my talk, but also perhaps reading some of the books on this, so that they can get a feeling for themselves about whether Marx's law is really important for us to understand what's going on in the world.
Right. So, especially I think the view that the underconsumptionist theory is quite dominant on the left, especially in certain circles, and underpins the theoretical framework of Keynes. So what are your main objections against that view?
Well, let's take very crude underconsumptionism. It says that workers don't earn enough money to buy all the goods that are being produced because the capitalists are selling them for more than the workers get in wages. So wages are less than prices of the goods, so there's a gap there, and therefore there's underconsumption, less consumption than to meet all the production. But if you think about it, listeners, that means that capitalism is impossible, because every day workers get paid less than the price of things that they produce, otherwise profits wouldn't be made. So it's a wrong-headed argument. It says that capitalism doesn't work. Well, clearly capitalism does work in a way. It's not impossible. It is working. There's a profit-making, money-making economy going on, and it's not collapsing permanently because workers can't buy all the goods. Capitalists are buying goods. There are two sources of demand, capitalists and workers, and capitalists are buying goods like factories and offices and raw materials to invest, to make money out of the commodities they produce. There's two sources of demand going on. So the very crude theory obviously is not true. What the Keynesians say is a little bit more sophisticated. They say, yes, investment by capitalists is very important, and that's obviously relevant, and when investment goes down, then you'll have a crisis. But they say it's not due to any fall in profit. They say it's either due to workers not buying as much as they should have done, or lack of confidence. There's a sudden change in the view about, Keynes called it animal spirits. It's a funny word, listeners, but we're saying that people have a sort of urge to do things, to make things, to go forward, and suddenly they don't have this urge. They lose this urge, this animal spirits, and then the capitalists stop investing and everything collapses. Marx would say, no, it's not an animal spirits urge. That may exist, but why does animal spirits suddenly go from an urge to invest to a lack of confidence to invest? He would say it's because the profits have changed. Profitability's changed. It's an objective factor. And it's something that's inherent to capitalism and cannot be removed. It's a contradiction in capitalism. It cannot be removed without getting rid of capitalism. While the Keynesians would say, all we have to do is get animal spirits up, and we can do that by making the government perhaps spend more money so the capitalists feel more confident, or we can cap the taxes for the capitalists so that they feel more confident, or we can give workers more wages so that they spend more. Of course, if they give workers more wages, where's that coming from? It's coming from the profits of the capitalists, so that it can actually make things worse. And there are lots of arguments I can add also about what I think is wrong with the Keynesian solution. So, but that, as you correctly say, Keynesian ideas are the dominant ideas in the labour movement. The dominant ideas in the pages of the financial press and so on is not Keynes. It is the idea that we need to get rid of government, make the markets free trade, free movement of capital, and everything. The market will work harmoniously. The Keynesian argument, the alternative is, no, that doesn't work, it's not harmonious. What we need to do is to get the government to intervene, which sounds good, but we're intervening with the government in order to either boost wages or cut the taxes of capitalists or boost spending in order to make capitalism work better. And that's their solution. The Marxist view is capitalism won't work better whether it's the harmonious view of the financial pages or the Keynesian view, because it's got contradictions that cannot be resolved under capitalism. That's what makes Marxist theory of economics revolutionary, and it suggests that you have to replace capitalism rather than make it work.
Right. So, looking towards the future, with higher levels of automation, artificial intelligence, etc. coming on. So the tendency of profit to fall, to increase, so to speak. What would that mean for the workers' movement? What would that mean for the development of capitalism, in your view?
Well, I think we're all reading the papers online is the word for robots, a dramatic increase in automation, that everything's going to be done by artificial intelligence, by all sorts of anagrams, what's the word? I've lost it now. You know, where you've got a software formula which can enables you to do things automatically. Algorithm, that's it. And the big data coming in all the time. This is transforming, and human beings don't have to play a role in this. Robots will replace the whole process of human labour over a period of time. Well, firstly, that doesn't seem quite so likely. There's lots of things that robots can't do, agility and all the rest of it, and they may be able to solve sums and do all kinds of quite even more complicated things. I mean, I saw recently that they did a competition where they wrote an economic article in a newspaper, and they had 5 different writers. 2 of them were real people, and the other 3 were algorithms. And one of the algorithms won the contest of being the best piece. So it was all done by turning the algorithm to using big data to produce the article. So we economists will be out of business soon, and it's estimated that maybe up to 50% of jobs as we know it now will disappear. So that would appear to be a dramatic change in the world, but it won't be that quick. Many new jobs will be created as well. So it's a dual process between the two. You can't be sure that it's just going to mean the collapse of human society as a result of robots. And also, more and more spending on robots relative to labour is going to probably drive the profitability of capital down and increase the intensity of crises over time. So robots and automation means more crises, and also means a growing divergence an inequality between those that own the robots and those that don't. So that's one of the big trends of development over the next period. There are others, the fear of the results of climate change and global warming that's coming, and the general rise in inequality. All these are creating increased contradictions for a capitalist system. I remind listeners, what is that? That's a system where we don't produce things that the majority of people need unless it makes a profit for the people who own the means of production and employ the labour. We have a contradiction between those that own the means of production and employ labour who want to make a profit and what people need. The two things are in contradiction, and this causes these contradictions develop in a process that those 3 laws I've described as they operate.
All right, I won't be keeping up you much longer. So if people are interested, you've written some books. Could you recommend maybe a few books, or maybe some other places where people can read about your work?
Yes, well, I think there are perhaps 2 books I'd like listeners to have. They can get them in there. We're just waiting for our dinner to go past there, the listeners. But the 2 books, both are on the usual channels, in the internet channels and in the bookshops. One is called The Long Depression, which I wrote 2 years ago, just more than 2 years ago, which describes what's happened since 2008, since the great slump of 2008, what's happened over the last 10 years and why there hasn't really been a sufficient recovery in the world capitalist economy. So that book is, I think, good for listeners to understand what's been going on and what's likely to happen in the future. It's called What Happened, What Has Happened and What's Going to Happen. The second book, it's a shorter book, which I published earlier this year. It's about Marx's ideas, which we've just been discussing, on his 200th anniversary. So it looks as those basic ideas that Marx presented, how he came about them. There's a bit of biographical stuff in there. What the critics of Marx say, why they say he's wrong, and why I think he can answer those points. And his predictions for the future are also in there. So I think if your listeners buy both their books, and they're not expensive, then I think will get a pretty clear idea of what I think, and I think also increase their understanding.
All right. Do you want maybe anything more to add for the listeners?
I look forward to see if the listeners want to make comments on it, if they can on your site, but I look forward to hearing it.
All right. Thank you for your time. Volgende week hebben we ons interview met Bob Reurs over zijn tijd als gedeputeerde in Limburg en andere zaken. En zullen we de discussie voeren over de rol van de SP zogezegd aan de knoppen binnen onze geweldige parlementaire democratie. Iedere kameraad die ons steunt, wordt van harte bedankt. Geef jij nog geen donatie en wil je weten hoe je ons kunt steunen, al vanaf de prijs van een kopje koffie of een flesje pils, wat je ook wil, kijk dan op linkshobbies.nl/doneren.